Moving into our committee of the whole, and there was a revised agenda sent out, I think, a few days before. That was a few changes there. Call that to order. Does everybody have that in front of them? Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest with regards to the committee of the whole meeting of today? Okay, if one does arise, you can declare at that time. We have 3 notices of motions. And the first one is Councillor Hicks. Do you wish to put that on the floor, Councillor Hicks? So, Councillor Hicks, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor O'Leary? Councillor Hicks, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. You all have the materials before you, but for the benefit of the listening public, I may run through it. So my motion speaks of the fact that Owen Sound and Hanover are the only 2 wholly designated communities in the County of Grey, wholly designated as primary settlement areas. I acknowledge that there are other primary settlement areas in the county, but the point that I make is that Owen Sound and Hanover are unique in the sense that they are the only 2 that are wholly designated. Secondly, that the town of Hanover, and this is an interesting stat, I don't know if anybody having read this had even thought about it, about 1/4% of the land in Grey County is occupied by Hanover, and Hanover produces about 15.2% of the jobs in Grey County. And for Owen Sound, that stat is that they occupy about 0.75% of 1% of the land in Grey County and produce about 50% of the jobs in Grey County. Sorry, that's together. Hanover and Owen Sound produce about 50%. Owen Sound on its own produces about 34.7% of the jobs in Grey County. And interestingly, I know the stat for Hanover is that about 50% of the people who work in Hanover do not live in Hanover. And I would probably think that stat might apply to Owen Sound as well, although I don't have that exact information. Thirdly, I talk about the fact that 25% of the people in Grey County on the wait list for affordable housing are looking for a home in the town of Hanover, and 75% of people on the wait list for affordable housing in the county of Grey would like to have a home in the city of Owen Sound. And that stat, just because I don't want to mislead anyone, I did put in the point that people can put their names on more than one list. So they can say, I'd like to be on the list for Meaford and as well for Owen Sound. Next, 11.5% of Ontario Works clients in Grey County are in the town of Hanover, and 49% are in the city of Owen Sound. And when we look at Grey and Bruce County as a whole, 7% of all of the ODSP clientele are from Hanover, and 29% are from the city of Owen Sound. Lastly, I pointed to the statistic, and you may have been reading a little about this in the media of late, talking about policing. Let me start on the first sheet here. Hanover is second in the province out of 50 municipal police services for charges per criminal charges per officer. Owen Sound is third on the list. So in Grey County, out of the 50 municipal police operations, we have the top 3, 2 of the top 3. And I don't know if that's a stat we want to be proud of, but it's just a stat, and I'm not saying it to say that we have, it's a problem area. Don't come to Hanover, don't come to Owen Sound because we have these stats. It's just a reflection of the fact that you've got a concentration of people in a very small area, which is why I focused on the land size. Hanover has 9 square kilometers. Mr. Warden, I believe that your municipality is pushing 900. Big difference. So when you put that many people into a small area, you're going to have a condensed social situation. So that's an alarming stat that I think needs to be studied. So the idea of the motion before us today is that we strike a task force to look specifically at the unique concerns of our two sort of primary settlement areas. I know for certain that if we look at the official plan, which has finally been approved by the province in 2019, there's lots to be said in our official plan about the role, about the things that we want to achieve as a county, and the role that the primary settlement areas has to play in terms of helping the county to achieve its goals. So one very simple example is that if we focus, and our official plan speaks to this, if we focus development primarily in those primary settlement areas, that in and of itself is a strategy towards maintaining our farmlands and maintaining the natural assets that we have in Grey County, which is one of the features that brings people here for tourism. So the primary settlement areas are important. Everyone is important. This is not singling out Hanover and Owen Sound and saying that we deserve more attention. I just think it deserves some different attention. And these stats are beginning to draw our minds to the fact that there are some particularly unique needs in those two areas. So in terms of jobs and economic development, we're seeing that half of the jobs are really from those two areas. It brings up issues around housing, and we all have housing needs, but I think particularly acute is the housing issue in Owen Sound and Hanover. Obviously, transportation issues. Many people will gravitate towards some of those primary settlement areas. If you don't have a car, maybe now you can walk to a grocery store, you can walk to the doctor's office, you can walk to see your social worker if need be. And of course, we have acute concerns around labor force attraction, because that's where many of the jobs are. Combine that with the second area, which I would say is some social concerns. So I know that our police chief, when we talk to him, he says his work is driven by several issues. One, domestic violence, drug and alcohol addiction, poverty, and mental health. So again, small area with a lot of people condensed, and a lot of problems in that little area. There is a big need in terms of social services. So the idea of forming this task force isn't to have something that's going to go on and on forever. It's simply to look at the data and to find out what are the ideas, what are the things that we should be doing to make sure that those two primary settlement areas can function in the way that our official plan says it should be functioning in order for Grey County to meet its goals. Those are my comments, Mr. Warden.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hicks. And I know a year ago, your mayor gave me a tour, or talked to me quite a bit about Hanover being the largest, or second largest urban center in Grey County, and about the importance of Hanover being part of that county. Councillor Leary, do you have anything to add as a seconder to this notice motion?
I might just say that, in Owen Sound, we have great concerns about the cost of policing. Our emergency services are 46% of our overall budget. And I think we could use an awful lot of help. And I think all of these things that Councillor Hicks mentioned it's all connected.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. Open up discussion. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Warden Hicks, and through you. Pardon me? Pardon me. Thank you, former Warden Hicks and Warden McQueen. Thank you very much for that clarification. So, Councillor Hicks, your motion has been on my mind for quite a bit of time, and doing the research, which may be why I referenced you in that capacity. So I do apologize. So I've done a little research, and thank you very much to county staff and lower tier West Grey staff. So I looked at the motion in terms of the primary settlements for Owen Sound and Hanover. And of course, we have Meaford is also another consideration. But when I sit here as a county councillor. I am not representing West Grey, although I do know statistically that for affordable housing, we do have 781 county residents on the wait list. 17% have listed West Grey as their first choice, recognizing you can have, you can enter any other county municipality there. So it's 8% difference from, West Grey is a secondary settlement, not a primary. So then I'm looking at land mass through the official plan and the statistics that we have here. And how I'm approaching it is now separating out our unique lower tier municipalities. I think some of the issues we can resolve as a county council, as opposed to having an individual task force just specifically dealing with the secondary or the primary settlement areas. We all, we have urban rural municipalities, we have very urban municipalities, but as a county, we're coming together and trying to resolve and be the best West Grey and Hanover and Southgate combined in Grey County. So I see this more as more of a divisive approach rather than bringing it all together for all of Grey County and having staff not only work on the primary settlement municipalities, but all of our settlement areas and you know, the more rural areas. So let's come up with solutions that are going to benefit all of Grey County as opposed to just particular ones in the approach. So I'd look for more of an expanded view rather than a condensed lens. I know some of the whatever issues that Owen Sound and Hanover have, perhaps I would like to be so bold as to say there was modernization funding that could look at different issues in that regard. So I'm coming from a more Grey County broad approach as opposed to a more specific one. And I'd look to either have the notice of motion expanded to include a review of Grey County as a whole, as opposed to just the settlement areas. Specifically, I think we need to look at Owen Sound. We have a fabulous harbor. We've got a lot of things going in each of the settlement areas, but also attention should not be forgotten with our other municipalities.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Robinson. I'm just going to go back to Councillor Hicks. Would you like to make comments to that, or do you wish me to take other comments around? Okay, thank you. Other comments from county councillors? Councillor Kentner?
Yes, through your warden, I'm curious about where, and I'm going to use the wrong terminology, I know, but this year we're supposed to be focusing on safety and wellness in our communities, and I know in Meaford we're spending a lot of money to marshal the community resources to look at that question, and I'm just not sure how you differentiate the concerns that you've raised, you know, Mr. Hicks, and what we're going to be looking at as individual communities or as the county. In Meaford, we opted to actually, you know, spend the money and look at our own particular problems as far as safety and wellness are concerned. But I know the county is going to be investing in that, and I'm not just clear why we would have two parallel investigations of essentially, because the issues you are raising are really safety and wellness. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kentner. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Council will recall that we supported a joint initiative with Bruce County in order to satisfy the community safety and well-being requirement that the province imposed on us. That work is ongoing. I believe that there is an update coming to the next council meeting about the status of the work and the assessments that are happening there. So I think that, Councillor Kentner, you're correct that the work out of community safety and well-being will, in part, inform the deliberations of a task force like this. But I think it's a part of it. I think what I heard here about the role of the primary settlement area and the jobs piece, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Project is not touching on those initiatives.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam CEO. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Warden McQueen. I didn't get a chance actually to talk to Councillor Hicks before this, so I don't know exactly what his thinking was and what he'll be looking for in the report. I look at the two other motions that are coming, notices of motion that are coming right after this, and one of them is environment or global warming, and I can't help but think as we try and cut down on the amount of car use, et cetera, there's one of those things that, you know, we're pushing development of primary areas, not secondary areas, or et cetera. And every time you build a house somewhere, somebody's going to have to drive to one of the major communities to get to work. You've got two cars going. There's one impact right there. Housing obviously is the other. Everybody that goes to court in Grey County comes to Owen Sound, General Court. Criminal court, I think Hanover is going to Walkerton, and we're picking up from Wyerton. I'm not sure about Sauble Beach. I think we're getting Sauble Beach. We're not getting Port Elgin. It's going to Walkerton. And north is coming in from part of Bruce. Because the courthouse is in the city of Owen Sound carries the cost of having to fund the policing and security in there. I think Councillor Hicks would tell you the same thing. Criminal court's probably the safest one. It's family court that's scary as far as you know, the potential of violence and the need for security. In any event, because it's in our community, we carry the cost of that, but yet we're providing the service for the entire area. So there's a lot of things that go on in our communities, both Hanover and Owen Sound, that really are Grey County issues. A lot of the people that come in for their drug treatment, for their medical treatment, for their doctor's appointments, to come to social services housing here in this building, live closer because they want to be able to get here. We apparently had somebody who was sleeping in a tent out in our backyard in this building so that they could come in quickly. They wanted to be able to be close. They didn't want to be somewhere else. And that's, you know, obviously an extreme example, but a lot of people in need across the county or across both counties and perhaps even further end up in Owen Sound and Hanover because of the supports that are there. But there are costs to it. There's social costs, not necessarily just financial costs. So I would love to see the report come back, which is what the motion is for, is to bring back a report to council from staff to look at this. I don't know what that report's going to say or what how it will turn out, but I would certainly support having the report come back. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Boddy, and certainly just even this part, I think it's an educational part that Councillor Hicks has brought forward even in your notice of motion in the sense of stats and stuff. Any other comments from county councillors? I guess a question to, oh, sorry, Councillor Millen?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and I guess my my thoughts regarding this were somewhat similar than as Councillor Robinson. she's right, of course. We are here as councillors of Grey County. We're not here representing our lower tiers necessarily. And Councillor Boddy, social services and housing does not provide services exclusively in Hanover or Owen Sound. We expend a lot of time and effort and money to take those services to our communities throughout the county. And we shouldn't forget that. And I also note on social media that the police chief of Hanover was good enough to point out that he thought that some of the people that were causing whatever these issues are, perceived or real, were coming from the outlying areas. That's not fair. And maybe that's not how he meant it, but that's how it read. We're all here as Grey County. We need to be doing the right thing for all our residents. Notwithstanding the issues that Hanover or Owen Sound may have, they are reflected in our other communities, maybe in greater or lesser magnitude. Rather than see this go forward, at this time at least, perhaps we need a little reminder, a report from both our social services and our housing, and indeed maybe even planning, of how we are currently addressing these issues. Because I know our staff work very hard at providing the services that our residents need, no matter where they are. I think we need to, rather than try to pick and choose, we need to have a more encompassing look at what we are currently doing before we go way off on a tangent and decide to solve a problem right in one little spot, or two, as it may be. So I can't support this at this current time, at least.
So just for clarity, Councillor Miller, are you suggesting more information to come forward in a more of a information document first?
I would.
Councillor Soever.
Yes,
Sorry.
oh, third time lucky. So I'm of two minds on this. I agree with Councillor Milne's comments. And I also hear what, Owen Sound and Hanover are saying. I mean, we know we have a Blue Mountains Task Force which addresses our unique needs. And I think really it would be kind of good to understand why Hanover and Owen Sound are so different. I mean, you can see that sometimes on the voting, for instance, when we voted the farm tax credit down to from 25 to 24, I believe they were the only two that, didn't see the farmer's point of view. So, so I think it's worthwhile to understand their issues and why they consider themselves different from the rest of Grey County. I know that in terms of services, yes, most of them are in this end of the county, and we hear that from our citizens all the time, is that we're funding 26% of the bill, but we don't have really any county presence in form of social services in the town of Blue Mountains. We have a part-time visitor to the town of Meaford. We do have a few affordable assisted housing units, but in some sense, I think it would be useful to see, and the policing issue as well. I mean, most of the rest of us are on OPP services at a cost of about anywhere from, kind of low 300s to high 300s per household. Owen Sound is at, I think, $711 a household. So I'm glad they're getting good turnover on their criminal charges. And so also Hanover, I think, is at $749 a household in terms of policing costs. So, I think it's worthwhile to look at that and say, maybe there is a way of doing things better and more efficiently. I know we get excellent OPP service. We pay a little bit more than most communities, but we're still under $400 a household because we're actually, we have our own sergeant and our own police station. So, I'm of two minds on this. I think it's always worthwhile to understand where other communities are coming from, and you know, a report from this committee on these issues may help that understanding. And then, but I also understand Councillor Milne's concerns that we are all here as representatives of Grey County, so we should be working toward the common good.
Thank you for that, Councillor Soever. Councillor Desai, and then I'm going to go back to the mover and seconder from some of the comments that are been brought forward.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just like Councillor Soever, I'm somewhat in two minds, mainly due to my membership on the Grey County Town of Blue Mountains Task Force. It bothers me a little bit that we feel that we need these individual task forces to realize the unique needs of these various municipalities. We have 9 municipalities. We can't go about having 9 different task forces. That is why we are at this horseshoe with 2 representatives from each of these 9 municipalities, so that we can bring the unique circumstances from our home municipalities on to this table, to the county level, and discuss those. I'm unsure of where that clear stream of logic sort of lost its way in the dreary desert sand, but we've set a precedent at this point by having a Town of Blue Mountains task force, which really is one of the only reasons I'm supporting the current notice of motion, is that we can't show a preference for the Town of Blue Mountains and have a task force for their unique needs, and at the same time deny that to Hanover and Owen Sound, which are, just as Town of Blue Mountains is, 2 economic drivers in this county. My question to this council is, where do we go from here? Do we go to a notice of motion at the end of this committee of the whole meeting that says we'd like a task force to address the issues of agriculture or rural municipalities, or municipalities where agriculture is the main job creator or the main economic driver? These are things that we really should think about, and I'd also like for us to think about why we need these task forces when really we can talk about these issues around this horseshoe without having a task force. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Councillor Desai. I'm going to go back to the mover. Okay, I'll take Councillor Fleet. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Warden. Each community, I promised my wife I wouldn't speak, but here I go. Every community offers different services. And like Hanover has the Salvation Army, so I'll use this as a little bit of a story from our police chief. There was 2 individuals in West Grey, and the West Grey police brought these individuals to Hanover because they were homeless and they needed a place to be put up, and they were put up at the Salvation Army. So that becomes an issue of Hanover and Hanover Police Services. So I think each community has different services, and City of Owen Sound, City of Hanover being a bigger populated area with your hospitals and that. And I think it's affordable housing is the issue in mental health. I listened to all the different scenarios around the table, and I feel, until we put an end to affordable housing, and, there's homeless people living on the street, City of Toronto, a tent city under one of their bridges. These people don't want to go to shelters because they're abused. They want affordable housing. So I feel that, when you offer a service, maybe that puts a lot of pressure on your police forces and mental health issues and social service workers. Thank you.
I think this has been a really good educational part of bringing, and I think there's a lot more information that we could bring forward. I'm going to go back to you, Councillor. I know there's a few other people who want to speak, but I want to go back to you, Councillor Hicks, because you introduced this in this motion. You've heard quite a bit of discussion around the table.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I would just say that the fact that we're having the kind of discussion that we are is probably a signal that we should be having this kind of discussion. There's a need here to have this information and to pry into what the stats are telling us. I want to just address very quickly, Mr. Warden, the comment around the common good. This is about the common good. Our official plan talks about what's good for Grey County. what's good for Grey County is that its primary settlement areas function well, because that benefits all of us. The problems, I'm not saying that there aren't problems in other municipalities that need to be addressed. This is not about that at all. This is just an acknowledgement that the stats seem to be pointing us in the direction to say there's something particularly acute in Owen Sound and Hanover. And maybe that's like, duh, of course, it would be acute. Those are your primary settlement areas. But nevertheless, we're beginning to see that those stats being reflected in costs that are reflected, for example, in the policing section alone. So we all benefit when Hanover and Owen Sound function well as primary settlement areas. Our official plan tells us that. This is a Grey County issue. This is not new. Read the official plan. It's there. It's already addressing it. I'm saying let's just take a better look. And are there some ideas that we can find to address those particular issues, not taking away from the fact that there's homelessness in every single municipality in our county, but it's particularly acute in Hanover and Owen Sound. 50% of our jobs are coming from there. So we need those two municipalities to work well. We need those primary settlement areas to do well. It's not just about safety and wellness, because the jobs piece comes into it as well. Our police chief, and again, I want to address Councillor Milne, because I think if you have a chance to speak with our chief, he would tell you that every time he hears about a new development, so if he hears about 200 homes going into West Grey, or Brockton having such and such development, he knows fully well that that's going to have an impact on policing in Hanover. It just does, because Hanover and Owen Sound, and other areas as well, are sort of centers that draw people, whether they're just coming to shop at Walmart and you know, or use some of the services that are in those primary settlement areas. Like it or not, those are centers. Those are the places that people come to either go to doctor's appointments or go to a restaurant or whatever the case may be. So this is a Grey County issue. I'm not here simply advocating for Hanover. Indirectly, yes, I am, as I should. But I want to make it clear, this is about our official plan. This is about us meeting the objectives outlined in our official plan. And this is clearly a Grey County issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hicks. Councillor Lurie, do you have anything to add to the, as you second this motion? And then I want to sort of wrap this up in the sense of moving forward. And I'm going to recognize you, Councillor Robinson. Go ahead.
I would just add that I don't think it's Councillor Hicks' intent to try and get Owen Sound and Hanover something that the rest of you don't get. I would just be interested in what the report says, rather than to have that discussion.
Thank you. And I'm going to recognize Councillor Robinson, and I'm going to vote.
Thank you, Warden McQueen. I do want to go back to a point that we're having a really great discussion here, but it's not just focused on the city of Owen Sound. It's not focused just on the town of Hanover. Each of us are contributing to this discussion. So Grey County benefits best when we're all working together as a county council. We've got professional staff that assist Grey County Council making decisions. I truly believe that we need to ensure that we are working together and we're not separating out. I quite like Councillor Milne's report or request for a report that's going to look at everything in totality with regard to our programs and services that we provide, our primary settlement areas, our secondary settlement areas, our urban-rural complement, because we're looking at absolutely all of Grey County as a vital place to live, the vitality of the place to live. I really don't, I will not support the motion as it is presented right now. I cannot support having county resources invested in a review for just two municipalities. I think the review should be in totality of all of our municipalities, and I think that's a better approach. A move forward that it is a united Grey County rather than just specifically looking at two municipalities.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Robinson. Madam CEO, from the staff perspective, do you have any questions or clarity you need or anything else before I take it to the vote?
I think if we look at the resolution as it's drafted before you, what the question is could staff bring a report to council with a terms of reference? So that's as far as this request takes us today, is just, do you want to put together a terms of reference so that you could have perhaps a more informed discussion about what the potential work would be or what the outcomes might be of putting this task force together, if that's what you chose to do. So I think that's where the question that's.
And I guess part of that task force, Madam CEO, could include information or a background report. I guess could that be part of that? Because I think from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of information either from Anne-Marie or Barb, that there's a lot of information on the social side and housing that I know I still could learn, and probably a lot of others around the table could learn.
So what I'm suggesting is that a terms of reference, if you pass this resolution as it's provided to you here today, staff would come back with a terms of reference that I think would try to summarize what the potential areas of focus were for a committee should you strike one. So here's data that we have, here's work that's been undertaken or could be undertaken, just to give you a sense of what information available to us, what level of effort would need to be required to really bring that forward.
And just from that, membership would be come back in the staff of how many members you would like to be on that task force?
Yes, certainly, yes.
Right, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. What I would be looking for is if there could be a friendly amendment for the mover and seconder, that the terms of reference not only just focus on the town of Hanover and the city of Owen Sound, but for all of our municipalities. So have the review done of Grey County overall.
Do I need a seconder for that before?
That's not a friendly amendment. You would need
Okay,
a
so there's a movement to amend the motion that's on the floor. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Hutchinson. CEO, do you have a?
It does, it does, I think it feels to me more like a pretty fundamental change to take it, the focus of this being the two primary settlement areas and the fact that those are spoken to directly in the official plan. So that was kind of a key pillar of this. I think we would have to think about if we were going to do something that was a county-wide assessment. I think we would just need to think about what that would look like, because now you've kind of set the official plan part of it aside.
Okay. Thank you for that, Madam. So the mover and second, Councillor Robinson, do you wish to speak any more to the motion that you put on the floor? Councillor Hutchison, do you speak? Okay.
I'm fine. Councillor Desai.
Sorry, Councillor Desai and then Councillor Soever.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Seeing that we're extending the terms of reference of these concerns to all municipalities in Grey County, can we expect a notice of motion at the end of this meeting to come similar to this about the Town of Blue Mountains Task Force? What I fail to understand, and I'll be very clear, I don't like the idea of having these individual task forces, but what I fail to understand is why we're showing a preference to the Town of Blue Mountains, and I'm a member on that task force, and I think it's important we address those issues. What I fail to understand is why we're addressing that set of issues while we're telling Owen Sound and Hanover to effectively go off and solve their own issues and come to this table with the solution, or have to accept a watered down task force. I fail to understand that. I think it's unfair to Owen Sound and Hanover that there's statistics that show that they're economic drivers. There's statistics that show that there's issues there. I guess through you to the mover and the seconder, why are we not willing to allow this task force to go forward unless it addresses all of Grey County, while we do have a task force that deals with unique issues in Town of Blue Mountains?
You were requesting a response to that?
If they have one.
And then I'll go back to the mover and seconder. Councillor Soever.
Okay, I push it 3 times, it works. Okay, so, yeah, I'm not really too sure where my colleague Councillor Desai is coming from, because nobody's turned this down yet, and nobody has, the wording of the amended motion hasn't been brought forth yet. So I would like to suggest that just a minor amendment, the wording of which, that Chris, they haven't brought an amendment, they just said they wanted it amended. So I'm just suggesting wording. So that I would just say we change it to say that to address how issues affecting these 2 primary settlement areas affect Grey County. So that would really keep the intent of the task force, is to look at these specific problems rather than look at everything. But the report would have to look at the impact of, these issues on the entire county, because I think maybe that was really the intent of it in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Soever. So you suggested, I don't know if it was a friendly amendment, but I'm going back to my Madam Clerk in the sense of process here.
So there actually is an amendment on the floor right now from Councillor Robinson and seconded by Councillor Hutchinson. And Tara has it up there that the motion be amended to reflect that the terms of reference extend these concerns to all municipalities in Grey County, meaning that should the amendment pass and the main motion itself as amended, that staff would be bringing back a report with the terms of reference that would look at the concerns expressed in the original notice of motion, and those would cover all municipalities within the county.
So I guess to the mover and the seconder of the amendment motion, your thoughts to what was been suggested.
You're calling on me first, if that's okay. Thank you very much, Warden McQueen. Yeah, I just look at, again, I'm just looking at the notice of motion before us, and it speaks to affordable housing, it speaks to social services, it speaks to policing, of which is not just unique to Owen Sound and Hanover. It involves all of Grey County municipalities. So that is why I'm just asking that if we're going to do a review, that the review is not is a full review. I like the idea of Councillor Milne's status report on how we're through our departments and our directors and staff dealing with just a status report on programs and services, how it impacts Hanover, Owen Sound, and the balance of our Grey County. That's what I'm looking for, something more in totality. And the idea is to look at everything in the Grey County lens. The idea of the task force for Blue Mountains, I see that's the issue of Blue Mountains. It's a specific issue to Blue Mountains, but the issues with regard to Hanover and Owen Sound, I think, extend far out to the other lower tiers. I mean, that's just a review I'm taking, and again, that is just part of a discussion. It's only one component. There's other positions and sides to everything. I'm just looking at an all in as opposed to just part in.
Okay, thank you, Madam CEO.
We have 2 other task forces to consider this morning, as well as the regular committee work. I would have a concern with the 8-month timeline here potentially. I think we're really at a fork in the road with this discussion. If council wishes to undertake a fulsome review that's countywide, I think that has bearing on what we're doing with the climate change and the housing task forces that are also here for your consideration. I also think to do that work real justice, I wouldn't want to put a time limit on it, in that we need to get through a budget process here. We have some other work that is also time sensitive. You're going to hear about a transportation program this morning, et cetera, potential redevelopment. We have a lot of things to manage, and I want to be sure that we're going to be able to fulfill all of our responsibilities appropriately here. So I for sure would suggest that if you're doing this as a countywide thing, that you also strike that, that 8-month time frame from this as well, or it'll come back in the terms of reference report, that 8-month time frame is not part of it, because I'm not entirely convinced that that can be met.
Thank you, Madam CEO. And I mean, other things that municipalities can do is you can hire a consultant that will get the information and bring a report back to council. That's also something else municipalities can do. So we have a motion on the floor to amend the original motion. I see there's no other comments, and so, sorry, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Warden. I really like the idea suggested by Councillor Soever, because I think it gets at the heart of the thing, and it addresses what I hear several people tell me is a concern, that perhaps this is, it has to be for the common good. That was one of the terms that was used. I think Councillor Soever's suggestion, proposal would be a friendly amendment, and would get to the heart of some of the concerns that I think people have, that this is looking at those 2 primary settlement areas in the context of a county objective. What are the objectives of the county? By the way, this is in our official plan. I know I'm repeating myself, but this issue of the primary settlement areas functioning in a particular way as a means to achieving county-wide goals is in our official plan. I'm just saying I think we need to take a good look at it, because there's some statistics glaring us in the face and saying, hello, you know, we need to look at it. Councillor Robinson's motion that's before us now isn't a friendly amendment. It really takes us beyond the context of where I wanted to go with this motion, which is to look at that issue of primary settlement areas in the context of the official plans, objectives for Grey County.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Hicks. I think we got to keep moving on, because we got a big agenda here today. The motion is on the floor. Is there anybody wish to speak who hasn't spoke? Okay, seeing that, those in favor of the amendment to the motion, hold your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion is lost. So we go back to the original motion that's on the floor. Any further discussion on that? Councillor Soever.
Really don't like friendly amendments. We'd prefer to have it as a formal amendment in there. So I'm sorry, Councillor Soever, I missed your wording the first time.
So just change just changing the last 2 lines to read, to address how issues affecting these 2 primary settlement areas affect Grey County. Well, I was just modifying that last. To address. Yeah, so instead of the, take that away and just replace it with the other.
Okay, so since this isn't a friendly idea, I need a seconder for that. Councillor Desai. Wish to speak to any other comment, Councillor Soever, since it's your motion.
No, I think it's self. No, Mr. Warden, I think it's self-explanatory.
Councillor Desai, do you have any comments to it? Okay, any other comments on the floor? So everybody understand the motion that's amending the original one? All in favor? Okay, hold your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, so we have an amended motion that is now currently moved by Councillor Hicks and Councillor O'Leary. Any further conversation, discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Hold your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, opposed? Hold your hands up. That's carried.
Which one?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Clarity? Councillor?
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, clarity? Okay, so the motion, the vote that we just had was the amended motion, because the amendment carried, and then it included the
Will include the, how to address
effects
issues
on the
affecting
the
Great
county.
Counties. Yes.
So that was what? Do you need, but it was carried. Do I want to do that vote again? All in favor? This is on the amended motion. All in favor? Hands up. Those opposed? That's carried. Okay. All right. Moving forward on to the second notice of motion. It was presented by Councillor Burley. Do I have a mover? Councillor Burley. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Carlton. Okay. Councillor Burley, do you wish to speak to the notice of motion that you have on the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Wow. Somewhat similar to the first notice of motion. My notice of motion was for all of Grey County. I make that very clear. The intent was to form a task force to look at both rural and urban settings in Grey County to do with housing. I think there's an asset out there that Grey County needs to tap into and get more information to start working with our developers throughout Grey County. See what's their opinion on how we can improve housing in our municipality. I would like to know too, each one of the 9 lower tier municipalities have different problems and ideas that's going on with housing. I'd like to bring that all together as a task force so that report could go back to county council as a whole. And I'm dealing with nothing more than housing. I know we have many, many other problems, like for instance in the 2 urban centers that were mentioned. Yes, there is certain, a lot of problems, which we will resolve as county council, but my notice of motion was strictly for housing, and I'm trying to put it in such a way that we can go back with, as our motto in Grey County, do it our way. That's all I'm trying to do. And Ms. Morgan, sorry, one thing I want to point out is that with our unfortunate changes, Councillor Bernecki is not here, so I would put it to the open floor for another person to sit on that committee. Okay.
Thank you for that, Councillor Burley. And Councillor Carlton, do you have anything to add to that motion that's on the floor? No, I don't. Okay. Open to the floor. Discussion. Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would like to put my name forward to be on this task force.
Councillor Soever.
Okay. Yes, I think this is a great idea. We in the town of Blue Mountains have moved forward with attainable housing. We have an attainable housing corporation. We will be in the next few weeks hiring an executive director for that, and we've completed a request for information. So we're quite advanced in this. I would like to, and this is a little difficult because that's why I was hoping Councillor Barnicki would be on this task force, because I think there's a lot to offer in the way of information sharing between our community and Grey County in terms of what we've done and the missteps we've had and, you know, what we should and shouldn't do. So I would like to put forward, but my deputy mayor, which I don't have yet, as a member. So that's a little difficult. So I'm just asking the clerk's indulgence to how I might do that. It may be that he's sitting here, but it may be that he's not. The council has to make that decision. So, anyway, yeah. Or I could put, if I put my name forward, could I step down and get my deputy mayor to step in after? This is the question for the clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Soever. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Warden McQueen. There are 2 options. You could certainly put your name forward for this, or we could, once a deputy mayor is chosen for the town of Blue Mountains, that the task force could bring a request back through their minutes to add that deputy mayor to their membership.
Okay, so for clarity, then I have a request that Councillor Desai would like to sit on it, but also Councillor Soever would like to sit on it. So then process-wise, we go around, carry on the conversation, and we'll come back to the composition.
You could do that.
Okay. Okay, further discussion on the motion that is on. Councillor Pollard.
I'd just like to support it. This is an issue that affects all of us. We certainly feel it. It affects us economically, it affects us in many ways, and I'm sure it affects everybody here. And none of us can do it alone. We're going to have all kinds of help, and we're going to have everybody's hand in to help. So any way we can put more effort into this, we have to support it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would just make the point that over the last year, it's clear that the two top issues that this council has identified, in my view, are transportation and housing. So it's very appropriate that we support a task force on housing. That said, I want to acknowledge that there's great work being done by our housing staff. We have a homelessness initiative. We have a very ambitious plan to reduce chronic homelessness by 50%. This task force, I think, will pick up that very good work and take it to the next level, and also send a message to our public that we're listening. They're telling us that housing is a very important issue. We hear it from everyone that comes and makes delegations here. We heard it from Fort County Labour Market Board. We hear it from the United Way. We're hearing it from all of the various agencies. So it's important. But I do want to say that the creation of this task force is not a suggestion at all that we aren't doing anything around homelessness and around affordability of housing. This is just taking it to the next step. And again, something that's, I think, identified in our official plan.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hicks. Any other? Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Warden McQueen. Maybe came from Brian a couple of weeks ago. Should we be having this conversation about going back to a committee structure versus being a task force? Is that what we're kind of doing in a sense? Should we be having that discussion?
So, Councillor Boddy, I'm going to have one-on-one with each councillor, and I'm going to ask that question individually, and then come back with some sort of some commonality of what I get out of that conversation with everybody. If we can sort of hold that for now. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sir Robinson.
Yeah, just a comment to support the motion before us, and I really like the emphasis that it is Grey County wide and the made in Grey approach, and I think that's the lens that we should be looking at with the intent of solutions.
Just in the sense that in the motion to Madam Clerk, it does say the names. It talks about a terms of reference coming back. Could that be left at this time because of the situation in Blue Mountain, that the terms of reference come back? It's recognizing representation from the Blue Mountains only at this time, and then once the terms of reference comes back, it's voted on, and then the membership could be finalized at that time? Or how would you wish to deal with that, Madam Clerk?
I think we have a couple of options here. We could certainly have Councillor Soever put his name forward for that and then withdraw later on once the Blue Mountains has determined what their next steps are at their municipality, rather than leaving just an empty spot. Or we leave it as is for now, and once the decision is made at the Blue Mountains, then the task force brings back a recommendation through council to add a representative from Blue Mountains.
Councillor Desai, are you okay with that? Councillor Sweat.
This is an important issue, so I'm happy to put my name forth, and when we get a deputy mayor, I'll assign him other duties, and I'll stay on this task force.
Madam CEO, did you have a comment? Councillor Robinson.
Madam. So just a question through you, Mr. Chair, to my colleague at Highlands. Yes. If you have an interest in this committee, I'm just and you've articulated that, and thank you for just confirming it. Could he not be considered for an appointment in addition to the other members that are already up for appointment?
Madam Clerk, good question. Madam Clerk.
Certainly, if that's the case and they're both wishing to that, and that is council's wish, then Tara has added those names in there, and as long as the mover and seconder are fine with those additions to their motion.
I'm getting a nod.
Thanks, Warden. Where does all this stop? You know, the committee structure, it maybe is gaining more merit, you know, because a lot of these things that we're trying to piece off now as task force could be done through a committee structure. I'm just concerned that we get too many task force going when the old structure that we had could have, you know, look at these issues. We'd have the time. It's not going to every time we have a task force, these are more meetings. These are a lot of people attending meetings, mileage, and I just think it could be done other ways that we're already compensated for. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and I see Councillor Millen was shaking his head there. Councillor Boddy, sorry, Councillor Boddy.
I just note that Warden McQueen, you're already on it, so that would be 2 people from one municipality, and it doesn't really matter, but.
Yeah, and I think the intent of this was to try to balance it out for everybody to be part of something going forward. So that was sort of the intent there, I think. But Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My intent is definitely not to have more members on the task force. My intent was more to affordable housing is an issue that affects younger families. My intent was more to bring that perspective of a younger family to the task force. And to respond to, that was the response to Councillor Robinson. So I do not want to have my name added to create a bigger task force. That was my intent initially, but the town of Blue Mountains can have that. To respond to Councillor Boddy, with the warden being ex officio on every committee, that would take, you know, it would preclude me from being considered for any committee. So I don't know if that's
So confirmation, are you still wishing to intend to be on there, Councillor Desai, or no? Focused here, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And through our hackneyed attempts here to create a committee structure, I think that's what we're doing, right? And I'm glad to see the councillor from, or the councillor from Chatsworth concerned about the cost, because it's very real, and time and everything else that goes along with these task force. This makes no sense to me at all. I'd be absolutely shocked if our housing department isn't already doing this. I'd be absolutely shocked, because I know they are, and they're doing a tremendous job. So, you know, I'd really love to hear from the Director of Housing as to, you know, what she thinks of this proposal. She may or may not want to do that, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millen. Any other comments around the floor? So just to be clear, Councillor Burley is moving this in the sense of the only exception is Councillor Soever will fill in the space until there's a deputy mayor. Yeah, you're on. Yeah, okay. Okay, seeing none, all in favor of this motion? Opposed? That's carried. All right, third notice of motion, Councillor Desai. Do you move this, Councillor? Before you speak, do you move this?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Warden.
Do you have a seconder? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Soever. Councillor Desai, you have the floor. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. All I'd like to say is the Wyatt and Keppel International Airport. I was surprised my colleague, Mr. Burley, Councillor Burley, did not mention it in the previous motion, so I will mention that right off the bat, because we do deserve a mention of a great airport in Grey County. This is a motion that deals with establishing a task force to deal with climate change, and it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't know if there's anything further I could say to this.
Thank you, Councillor Desai. Councillor Soever, do you have anything to add as a seconder?
Well, I think climate change is an important issue that we're facing, and those of us who live by the bay will have noticed the water's risen a bit. You know, and it doesn't look like it's going to be cold enough this winter to actually lift much of the water out with lake effect. So, and there's no ice on the bay at all this year, whereas other years it's been frozen over almost completely by this time. So, you know, these are important issues, and you know, speaking to, you know, do we need a task force? A task force isn't essentially a committee, but with an end date and firm objectives. So I think, you know, as we consider the impacts of climate change and what is doable, there's been a lot of things that have been proposed and quickly gained popular support, which some of which are good initiatives, others are which are costly and achieve very little. So I think it is important for council to delve a little deeper into this, and in essence, this is the committee structure. So the people on this committee really, you know, will have the responsibility of filtering through some of this and bringing back advice to council as to whether, you know, what is an effective and achievable in terms of finances and other resources like staff resources, programs. I mean, you can come up with 1,000 programs, but if they detract from other things, they may in fact be negative. So I think it's important that we do get a few councillors who become much more familiar with. There's a lot of information out there. I dare say that if you look on the web, you know, information is added every day, and it would be good to have that insight.
Madam CEO, do you have anything to add or anything from staff perspective?
I think we're fine to go ahead.
Okay. Any other questions from comments from county councillors? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Hang on. I didn't do that count before, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opposed. All in favor again? We did that vote again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's carried. Okay, thank you. I know we're moving along here in the morning, but I would like council's wish to continue on with our delegation just because they've been patiently waiting. And then we'll take a break right after that. So Kevin, come on up, Kevin, and introduce your guests. And welcome. And thanks for your patience, everyone.
Good morning, Warden and County Council. It's our pleasure to inform you of our first annual Frontline excuse me, Family Wellness Day that's been put together with a collaboration of Grey County Police, Fire, Paramedic Services, and our Canadian Armed Forces. And just from our organizing committee, I just wanted to introduce some people that are here this morning. Kristen Wepler, who's a peer support member of West Grey Fire, Craig Ambrose, the Chief of Owen Sound Police, and Larissa Lamrock, who is the Family Peer Support Coordinator for the Department of National Defense. There's others as well. We have Doug Barfoot, who is the Fire Chief in Owen Sound. Mark Urquhart and Joe Draper are our supervisors here in Grey. Rob Hatton's playing a key role in us getting this information out to the public, and our own Rick Tremblay is a paramedic with us, has looked after a lot of the promotional materials you see here that's been developed. This will be an inspiring day focused on the mental wellness for first responders, military personnel, veterans, healthcare professionals who are exposed to mental stress, and also for the families that support these frontline professionals. It's known fact that frontline staff turn to their families when coping with traumatic stress, and quite often that's where we'll be the first people that will see changes and also see and support them through this. We know that family members play a vital role in supporting their mental well-being, but only if they're included in an open conversation from the outset. Our goal is to give families the knowledge to recognize potential problems and tools to know on how and when and where to respond. So for this, on Sunday, February 9th, we'll open at 1:30 at the Harry Lumley Bayshore Centre in Owen Sound. We have a keynote speaker we're excited to have there to talk, is Kendra Fisher. She grew up in Kincardine and is a former member of the Canadian women's national hockey team. She had to leave actually just as quickly as she joined due to mental illness, but now she's a firefighter with the City of Guelph, and she runs a program called Mentally Fit, who works in schools in Grey Bruce County. And she'll talk about her personal struggle with mental health and resiliency, and then now her recovery. Mark Urquhart, who's a supervisor with us, he has quite an extensive history with teaching the Road to Mental Readiness program, and it talks about the mental health continuum of being healthy, reacting to operational stress, and then when you're ill and when you're injured. And he'll talk with family about, signs and symptoms to look for, and different types of treatment and resources that are available. Larissa is here with us this morning. Very extensive history with family peer support. She works with the Department of National Defense, and she also has done a lot of work with us as far as getting local resources out to our first responders and military. And in the evening, we'll have a screening of The Other Side of the Hero and it'll be at the Galaxy Cinema. In the documentary, we get to know first responders through their families, their spouses, and their co-workers and themselves. We'll meet first responders who've experienced the flip side of what can happen when they discover that they're not emotionally immune to all that they deal with on their on-duty time. If anybody's watched Flashpoint, actor Enrico Calantoni, who's been big in the Tema Contra initiative in the province, he actually talks through this and is our guide on the journey. And then Mark will be back that night to talk about signs and symptoms again and resources available. Our hope is to be able to catch, you can go to both events or you can go one or the other, but we'll catch day and night and try to get it out to as many people as possible. We'll have members of their peer support team on hand at the events. Police, fire, and paramedics all have teams that will have members there. And also Larissa is organizing for our local resources to be there at different booths to be able to provide opportunities for families to see what's available in the community. For example, we'll have our EAP provider or our Human Resources Department will be there as well to talk about EAP. So I just have a bit of a trailer here just to kind of give you an idea about the video.
Hey Julian, can you describe what Daddy does?
He fights fires. And he saves lives.
Thank you. How you doing? I'm Rico.
Oh, no shit.
How are you?
I'm Annette.
Hi, Annette. My pleasure to meet you. It's beautiful. Because you guys are the real deal, man. You guys are the real deal.
Because we are actors. We feel a vicarious sense of responsibility. But I can't imagine what kind of pressure that police officer is under over a 20-year career.
When we sign up for the job, what we don't know is what emotional toll this job takes on you.
Sometimes it's just bad, and you have to talk through all the bad stuff.
There's a lot of shame involved. It's one of those things where you're just not tough enough. And that was basically what I was told by somebody that, was somebody that I looked up to. Well, maybe you're just not tough enough.
The toughness is when we lose this mask because we are human.
What stops these services, really, do you think?
I think one of the main reasons is I call it the John Wayne syndrome. When we look at John Wayne and the character he portrayed, he was a man's man.
So we'll be able to use that video in further training as well after this event, which we look forward to showing with more staff. But our goal is really to continue more openly talking about mental health and really how it pertains to mental wellness. It's really to support our frontline workers who are coping with operational stress and with the goals of preventing PTSD. We all know that they face operational stress daily, but the thing is if we can do it through teaching and then also, and then from there, education, and then around early intervention, that that we don't want people to develop PTSD, because we know if we address these symptoms early, that the likelihood of going down that road, they most likely won't, but we just got to be able to early identify. So we're really excited about this. We have been working as a group between police, fire, paramedics, and military for probably at least 6 months now or more, and I think they're excited for where we'll go in the future, all working together. So open up for anybody here who wants to say anything else, and we're really looking forward to that day. Okay.
Well, thanks, Kevin, and thanks for everyone for coming today. And it's very important as the first responders, you got to have that smiley face on all the time, right? And you're dealing with people and their injuries and stuff. So, I don't know if there's any comments from county councillors. Sorry, Councillor Woodbury.
I would just encourage anybody to go out and be there, talk, be part of the event. As a first responder for over 30 years previously, the attitude is what needs to change, and it has. When I started as a firefighter, that was suck it up, keep going, and you never talked about anything at a fire hall. You took that with you, and so, and you always had to have, like, say, that look of confidence on your face when you turned up an emergency, because people are trusting you. Well, over the years, I've buried quite a few friends that have killed themselves over trying to keep that up. And what I saw before I retired was the crews or the organizations that pushed the openness and the being able to talk about it. And I had the fortunate, or the fortune of being with a crew that had worked together for quite a while and was very open. We'd sit at the kitchen table after every call, no matter what it was, and just say what happened. You think of when you think of some of the stress and some of the problems, you think of, oh, you must see gory things. You know what? You can't pick what it is. I had one of the people that worked on my truck that we were at a simple medical call, and it was a teenager that looked identical to, as far as we went up there, to his niece. And I've been to horrific things with this guy, and nothing affected him like that. He was driving the truck and he couldn't drive it back. Like, it was that bad. So the effects of this are far-reaching. They can be devastating to families, crews, everything else. And to make the awareness, try and changing that culture, which has been done, but it needs further, is really important. So I applaud you for what you're doing. It's really necessary, and I'd encourage anyone to come out and see that, just to get a glimpse, because, like I say, it is behind that mask.
Well, thanks for those important words, Councillor Woodbury. Any other? Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. This issue hits me personally as well, because my 22-year-old son just completed the firefighting training as well as the paramedic training. So as a parent, I'm well aware of the risks. And so I kept asking him, even as he was going to school, are you guys talking about this? And I'm happy to say that it is part of the curriculum. So very early in his training, they were addressing the issues that you're going to be facing, having very real and important discussions, and beginning to prepare them. And so I feel like that sort of mentality that Councillor Woodbury speaks of is beginning to change, but it will take some time, because these sort of institutional old-timers are still very much there, and it will take a bit of time to change attitudes, but it's beginning to happen, so that's a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Any other comments? Well, thank you very much for attending, and I guess those that can attend on Sunday, February 9th, do so. And certainly we applaud you for what you're doing. Thank you. At this time, we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back to continue our committee of the whole meeting.